James and Ellen, they were very much involved in the work. That's a whole story all by itself. How they organized. They had a team of 8 young people called the Rochester team. The oldest being James at 32 and Ellen at 26. The youngest boy, Warren Belden, I think, at age 14 years old. The average age was 23. 3 or 4 of them was terminally ill. Uriah Smith and Anna Smith. Anna Smith, who wrote a number of the hymns that are in our hymn book. They were working together with James and Ellen to crank out that paper, The Present Truth, and later the Review and Herald Sabbath. They also gave us the youth instructor. They gave us the first Adventist hymnal. These young people who worked almost 14 years, some of them did, to bring this gospel to the scattered flock who had scattered after the disappointment of 1844. And then, of course, we know that the work came on down, that Ellen had dreams and visions and had a concern for the work in the South. And her son, Edson White, who was moved by what his mother had written and talked about concerning the work in the South, and he built a boat called the Morning Star. And he took the Morning Star down on the Mississippi River. And there he started school. And as you can see in this picture here, it was not just the children that were coming. It was the old people as well who also wanted to learn and read and write. And James Edson used that little booklet called the Gospel Herald to teach the blacks how to read and write, to teach them about God and how to take care of themselves. And then here we have a little bit here, One Determined Woman, talking about the first missionary to India, Anna Knight, and the great work in which she did and the school that she started to continue to further the work that Edson White had began there. And as we travel around the corner here, the journey continues. It's a powerful instrument which God has ordained to be combined with the energies of the living preacher to bring the truth before all nations, kindred, tongues, and people. And we are trying to help our people understand that this publishing work is a mighty arm of the heralding of the gospel, and that we are to work together with the living preacher and with our churches. There's another statement here from the book, No Higher Calling, page 16 to 17. As one aptly expresses it, the preacher writes his words on water, but the writer carves his word in stone. Ellen White agrees. A sermon may be preached and soon forgotten, but a book remains. The books distributed 10, 20, and even 50 years ago are still preaching. The books you sell or give away today will keep turning souls to Christ until he comes. Could any work on earth be more lasting and more satisfying? And even Mr. Abraham Lincoln himself says that writing is the greatest invention of the world. And we believe that. It's our mode of communication down through the ages. Personal publication that was published on James White's boat, The Morning Star, was entitled The Gospel Herald. This is educational number here. And in 1934, it was changed from the Gospel Herald to the Message Magazine. And now the Message Magazine has celebrated more than 100 years of being produced. This magazine was produced to deal with articles and information that was most important to the black community. It has been a successful magazine all of these many years. As a matter of fact, at President Obama's inauguration, our regional presidents got together and decided to fund a project for us to distribute 100,000 copies of the Message magazine at the inauguration. I am happy to report that my team was given 45,000 copies We took 2 bus loads into Washington, D.C., met some other distributors there, and we were able to distribute in 3.5 hours 45,000 copies of the Message magazine. And just to see how the Lord worked with that issue of the Message magazine, here is an awesome picture that's just beautiful that was retrieved from the Baltimore Sun website. This picture was flashed all over the television in the Baltimore and nationally. But the great thing is that Ebony magazine, who had their photographers there at the inauguration, of course, picked up a torn page of the Message magazine. And as you can see here, this picture, and I hope that you're getting this, as you can see here, the image of this Message magazine torn on the right here, on the left corner, torn here, and it's surrounded by asphalt. So in my mind, I just imagine the photographer aiming his camera at the ground to shoot this Message magazine. And on page 80 of the Ebony April issue of 2010, on page 80 was this torn copy of the Message magazine. Amazing. The moment that I heard about that, my mind went to a statement that Sister White had made in the Colporteur ministry. She says that we should treat as sacred treasure every line of printed matter containing present truth. Even the fragments of a pamphlet or of a periodical should be regarded as valuable. Who can estimate the influence that a torn page containing the truth of the third angel's message may have upon the heart of some seeker after truth? And I was so happy that my publishing leaders, Elder Robert Moses and Sister Jean Good, when we went down to Washington, D.C., when we were asked, what shall we do if people toss the magazines aside and throw them on the ground? We instructed them not to pick the magazines up. And the reason we were able to do that, because we had read the statement concerning a torn page. And the Lord gave us such press with that distribution. As we turn the corner here, I'm going to go here, the early publishing pioneers. And I was so happy as I went through the archives to find this lovely portrait of Brother Virgil Gibbons, who was born 1892, died in 1863. He was the first Negro Publishing Department secretary, and he retired in the Allegheny Conference. Oh, he has such an outstanding story. As a matter of fact, there was a word that was constantly used to describe Elder Gibbons, and the word was standard barrier. He went to, started out in Ohio, and the brothers saw his work. Wherever he went, the work increased, and they sent him from place to place. He was not in one place more than 2 years, and he was sent to another place. And there was another word that came to mind. They said that wherever he went, he took impetus. That means a driving force. A driving force. So God just blessed the works of his hand. And I had an opportunity to meet this man here, 45 years in the literature ministry. And C.M. Willis was his name. C.M. Willis said he do not claim to be a scholar. He can claim no educational attainment at Seventh-day Adventist schools. He didn't have that privilege, even though he feels that all of our children should be educated in the Adventist school system. But he didn't have that particular privilege. But his mother took him and his brothers to Sabbath school every Sabbath for years. But then his mother died. He was at age 24 when his mother died. And he said it was at that time that God really began to work with him. And he said, and God taught me And as a matter of fact, when his name is mentioned, you think of a man taught of God. He said, God taught me. And he went on to become, to work at the Review and Herald in an administrative position in the periodical department. He was the first black to work at the Review and Herald as a black man. And he went on to do many, many things, even came down to the Southern Pub down here in the southern part of the country. Then he was called to the General Conference as Associate Publishing Director of the General Conference. And he traveled to 5 different continents. And before he retired, a man who had no credentials, but he was taught of the Holy Spirit. Oh, what a man, to be in his presence. I had an opportunity to meet him 1 or 2 times, and to be in his presence and to hear him expound upon the Word of God, and to share the wonderful testimonies of the power and the leading of God in his ministry was just awesome. Before he retired from, and I think that was in 1975, from the General Conference, the General Conference asked him to produce a set of books for literature evangelism. He produced a set of books. Number 1, both of these books are on leadership, literature evangelism, recruiting for literature evangelism, and salesmanship and its assets. A man with no credentials, a man who was taught of God, and produced a set of books to lead back at the General Conference for literature evangelism. Here he is here with L.W. Brantley, who was the manager of the book and ABC store at the Review and Herald and at the Allegheny East. And then George Anderson, who was the associate publishing director, who went on later to become publishing director at the Allegheny East Conference. And the white gentleman here is B.M. Wickwire, the Union Publishing Secretary, shaking the hand of C.M. Willis. And it wasn't the Allegheny East Conference, it was the Allegheny Conference. And Miss Mabel Barber, who was with T.S. Barber, who was the publishing director out in the Lake Region Conference. This is a work in progress, and the sequential unfolding of all of the pioneers is still a work that we are working on. But I'm happy to present here, if you can get this picture here, of Elder William C. Scales Sr., 1934, a call porter. As a matter of fact, the caption says, "Oh, so now I'm a call porter, ready to conquer Cleveland, Ohio for God." Well, let me tell you how he came into work. Well, Elder Virgil Gibbons had heard about his entrepreneurship spirit, and he was always looking for Elder Scales. But every time Elder Scales would see Elder Gibbons come in the front door, Elder Scales would go out the back door. He didn't want to do call porting. So finally, Brother Gibbons was sent to another area, and Lewis Brantley was sent to Cleveland, Ohio. And one evening, he's at prayer meeting. And when prayer meeting was over, he was just sitting there alone in the fellowship hall. And Elder Scales and his wife noticed that there was a stranger sitting in the fellowship hall. So they went down to introduce themselves to Elder Brinkley. And Elder Brinkley said, "Do you know where I can find the YMCA? I need to get a room for the evening." Well, being good old hospitable Seventh-day Adventist Christians, they decided that they would invite him to their home for the evening. And little did Elder Scales know that the Lord was sending another publishing man. And this publishing man caught up with him. They became good friends, and before you knew it, Elder Scales had his book bag, and he was doing literature evangelism. He went on to become Associate Publishing Director in Cleveland,